Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Love Your Dogs podcast. My name is Bre Drake. I am a holistic dog health educator and a certified holistic pet health coach. This podcast is heart led, experience based, real life, and now sometimes there is a little bit of science. Today, I have a very, very special guest named Nicole Nelson. She is a natural rearing breeder and just a really passionate voice in the holistic dog space who is committed to keeping an open mind and learning and growing. I just love her. Her and I spend a lot of time bouncing ideas off of each other and just chatting about different topics. And that's why I brought her into this episode today. She had listened to my conversation with Dr. Kendra Pope last week, and there was a few things that we were both like, wow, this has kind of piqued our interest or maybe changed our opinions on certain things. So one of the things that really piqued our interest was the epigenetics concept and the inherited epigenetics specifically. And beyond that, I get challenged often, and I was actually recently challenged again by someone on Instagram to talk more about genetics and the impact it can have on our dog's health. And historically, why I haven't really talked about that is because it is still a very small piece to a much larger puzzle when it comes to our dog's health. And our dogs that don't have a whole lot of genetic diversity and maybe have more gene mutations that make them more susceptible to disease, it's just that it makes them more sensitive. They're not guaranteed to get disease. Environment and lifestyle matters so much. And then on the flip side, our dogs that have a lot of diversity and have really strong genes, just because they start out stronger and can tolerate a lot more, there's still a point where environment and lifestyle can take over and still make those dogs sick. So that's why I don't really touch on it a whole lot. It is important. And that's why I have Nicole here to talk about this, because I think natural rearing breeders play a huge role in determining the future for our dogs and their health, and especially from not only a genetics perspective, but an inherited epigenetics perspective. So, Nicole, thank you for sitting through that whole long intro. I just wanted to set the stage and get people fired up about this topic like we are. So, go ahead and tell us a little bit about how you got into natural rearing and, what you love about it and what your plans are. Because I know you have some big plans coming up.
Yeah. So it started kind of with tragedy, like most of our stories. I always wanted a boxer my whole life. Like that was my breed. So as soon as I was an adult and kind of like somewhat established, the first thing I bought was this boxer puppy.
Yeah.
And she ended up being my allergy dog. I did everything traditionally, like I was vaccinating and I'm flea and tick, and I'm taking good care of her, feeding
Yeah.
her, eventually prescription kibble because she had the worst allergies you've ever seen. And so I had done everything traditionally and everything I could, but she ended up dying of cancer at age 7. And so I was like, what in the world? At that time, I had like a 4-month-old and a 1-year-old or 2-year-old baby. So I'm like, I can't get a puppy right now. I'm going to take this year to like regroup. But during that year, somehow this one girl mentioned raw feeding. And I was like, that makes sense to me. And so during this like year off of having a dog, I did a bunch of research. There wasn't much to have. This was like over 15 years ago, but the person I found was that Dr. Karen Becker. And my main concerns were, can dogs actually like eat raw bones? Like I was like, can they do that? And then I was worried about bacteria. So I'm like, can they process that bacteria? Those were just my two things that I needed to know. And so I figured out they could. So eventually I get this, second boxer puppy, and I just throw her this chicken wing. And she's 8 weeks old, and I didn't know what I was doing. And
Mhm.
she just ate it. And I just sat there like, oh my gosh, like she ate it. And so long story short, with that dog, I still, that my first step was raw feeding. So she was raw fed her whole life, not necessarily balanced in the beginning because I didn't quite fully understand it yet. And I know that I did vaccines maybe till age 3, but for sure the first year of her life. And then she was spayed early too before her first heat. So she lived to be 10. She lived to be
Yeah.
10, but they were healthy years. It still wasn't as long of a life as I was kind of hoping for. But when that dog was 5, I got Daisy, who's like my current, she's a Levitt bulldog. And I got her from a natural rearing breeder who's my friend Melissa. And I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I was like, oh my gosh, I want one of the puppies from your litter. And she's like, well, do you think in the future we could use her as like one of the moms, for future puppies? And I was like, yeah, that would be so cool. Thinking that Daisy would go to her house and she would do all that and whatever. And so when the time came, I was like, Melissa, do you think like I could do this at my house? Could you show me what you're doing? This is fascinating. And so that's how I got into it. Was Melissa was my mentor, and then Dr. Levy, the veterinarian we talked about, my vet, she was part of it. So like that's how my group formed. And then I had 3 litters with Daisy, and that was like boot camp. Like I learned so much. I had no idea what I was doing really, but during that time, it was like homeopathy came on board, a truly really balanced diet, came on board for me. No sods. I gave Daisy no sods, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was just following instructions and it really didn't click. But I'm like, I trust Melissa and Dr. Levy. And I hadn't vaccinated really much, my old dog. So I was like, I think I'm fine with this. So anyway, that's kind of the long story. And so I did 3 litters with Daisy, but my heart is with boxers. Like you just kind of get attached to a breed.
Yeah.
And so in the midst of my like breeding, I met Paula Vandervoort, who you've had on, and she's like this boxer breeder that has been doing it for over 50 years and much of it naturally. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, how did I find this person?
Yeah.
And so before she even knew who I was like, I want one of her puppies to breed with someday, which no breeder, I'm a nobody, right? No breeder would like, how would I even do this? But slowly but surely, I've made this relationship with Paula, and that's kind of the plan. Is she has generations of naturally reared dogs, which we'll get into the epigenetics and why this is so attractive to me. And so if I could get one of her 4th generation naturally reared puppies to start my breeding program with, that's a lifetime of work that I would just start as my foundation. We'll get into why that seems valuable, but that's my plan. So I'm just waiting for this perfect puppy to come along. And once Paula, is like, here's the one, then I'm ready for it. So that's kind of my plan, is to breed boxers naturally reared through Paula's line.
Yeah, and a lot of critics of breeders and purebred dogs. And, I get a lot of pushback online like, oh, of course your dogs died from cancer. They were golden retrievers. And there's just so much more to the story. And having lost 2 Goldens, when I was on the hunt for a breeder, I didn't know anything about natural rearing breeders. I didn't know they existed. And I think so many people listening don't know. And that's another important reason why you're on this episode right now, because I want people to realize this exists. And the goal should be to find a natural rearing breeder in today's world. And so when I was looking, I was just thinking, I'll find a breeder. I'll ask them not to vaccinate. I don't even know if that's a thing. And then through just repeated Google searches and going way deep into the Google pages, I came across a natural rearing breeder. So then I knew that that was a term. So then I started Googling that and was able to find, there's not a ton of options, but there were some. And that's ultimately who I got Pine from. So yeah, the genetics thing is a problem for our purebred dogs. Their gene pools are getting narrower and narrower the more they're bred. A lot of purebred dogs are bred for the wrong reasons, and it makes them more sensitive. Like I talked about at the beginning, it doesn't necessarily mean they're destined for disease, but it makes them more sensitive. So tell me and you're closely associated with the Natural Rearing Breeder Association, and you guys have a code of ethics that you adhere to and breeding standards. So tell me a little bit about what that looks like and what things you were thinking would be beneficial to implement based on some inspiration from Dr. Kendra Pope.
Yeah. So first of all, nrbreeder.com is the Natural Rearing Breeder Connections page. And you could go on there and look at their code of ethics, and it's pretty high standards. Besides the natural rearing stuff, it's just high standards for quality breeder anyway. You need to meet, these things. But then in addition, you do all these natural rearing protocols. They're only fed a raw diet. They are only on no sods or nothing. They're not vaccinated. You can go through the list, but it's along the lines of just like what you talk about of how you care for your dog.
Mhm.
That is how we're caring for our dogs and our litters. And besides that, something that I'm currently learning through Paula is there's something called coefficient of inbreeding. It's
Mhm.
COI. And this is a little bit new to me, but I've already taken a course on it. And I'm like,
Oh, you
yeah,
did.
figure this out. But it's actually common sense. It's like you wouldn't have a baby with your cousin because
Yes.
you just know that you shouldn't. Well, all purebred dogs are essentially inbred at some
Mhm.
point. That's just
Mhm.
how they're created. But now that there's a lot of diversity in the breed, you can do testing to see, should my female mate with this male? And there's a percentage. So the COI isn't like telling you necessarily their exact genetics, but it's a percentage of risk. Like,
Mhm.
hey, these two have 30% of their genes in common. So that's risk. Like, that's a high risk. And
Yeah.
it seems like that's somewhat common to have that high of this coefficient of inbreeding.
Yeah, I think isn't that the standards they aim for? Would you say like 30%, 30 to 40%?
You want it to be low.
Yeah, but aren't most I'm sorry, I guess I meant to say most dogs have one of like 30 to 40% on average, I think is
It
what I
seems like
saw.
that's not
Yeah.
uncommon. Yep.
Yeah.
And you want 5% or lower.
Yep.
It seems like you'll never get 0%.
No.
You just won't. But you don't. So a lot of times breeders will be like, oh, I like this color. So I'm going
Mhm.
to breed like this color with another one that's this color. And if you're not factoring in how close their genetics are, not only are you maybe overlapping the color to get the color you want, but
Mm.
what diseases or what genetics are they carrying that are also in common? And then you're just like a higher percentage that you're going to get some of these poor outcomes as well.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important. It's like you're kind of like setting them up for failure if you're not aware of who's going together. Like who are you mating with each other?
Yeah.
So that is something that's pretty big. Other things, that are important in the natural rearing space, like now we maybe we're gonna switch to epigenetics. Um, you wanna do
Yeah,
that?
I wanted to add too about coefficient of inbreeding. You can run one on your own dog. Which is
Okay.
interesting. Yeah, I know, like, it's obviously a tool that most breeders should be utilizing
Mhm.
to make sure there's diversity, but like you mentioned, there's a lot of show breeders who are breeding for very specific things and not necessarily longevity and, like, performance and strength, where, like, a lot of our working dog breeds actually have more diverse gene pools because they're breeding out dogs that aren't strong and aren't performing
Mhm.
well, which is interesting, but I was curious about that. I'm like, I don't know that Pines breeder did that. And what could let's see, there's a couple of websites. I'm like, could I look at this to just see where Pines at?
Yeah.
And there's actually a couple of online companies, Embark, and I'll put all these in the show notes, Embark and Wisdom Panel, where they can run DNA tests that estimate genetic diversity and inbreeding directly from the dog's DNA, which is pretty cool.
Mhm.
And, it might send someone into a spiral.
Yeah.
It may be helpful to know, but at the end of the day, it's like none of that should matter. We should still be focusing so much on environment and lifestyle, regardless of genetic strength and diversity. So, but that is a really cool thing that if there's any breeders listening, I would encourage to look at and incorporate in a breeding program just to make sure that our dogs are starting out with a cleaner slate, a better slate. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, we can get into epigenetics.
Well, quickly before we do that, now
Yeah.
I've thought of what I wanted to maybe add to.
Yeah.
Okay, so Embark, this
Uh-huh.
genetic testing. So with
Yeah.
Daisy, we did that.
Mhm.
We weren't necessarily, because I don't think we knew of coefficient of inbreeding. So we weren't
Mhm.
necessarily looking at that number, but each breed kind of carries its own problems.
Mhm.
And so you can do genetic testing to see, like, are they a carrier for this? And you can learn a lot about the dog that you're about to breed. And a lot of times if they don't meet standards, you should say, "Oh my gosh, this was my plan to breed this dog, but I can't." I was following this German Shepherd breeder who you could tell was super quality. I don't think she was necessarily natural rearing, but just like
Mhm.
a good traditional breeder who was trying to do the right things. And she had this German Shepherd because once they're 2 years old is when you would do this testing, mostly to see if they're going to be a candidate for breeding. And
Yeah.
she's like, he didn't pass like this one thing that was important for her. And
Yeah.
she's like, it's so sad because I'm watching all these other German Shepherd breeders who don't do any
Mhm.
testing, just breed their dog, who probably have worse going on than what her dog did. And she's like, but I can't do it. I can't do it. And it's like that would be really hard to see
Mhm.
other breeders who aren't doing any of this
Yeah.
and they're just having litters and doing all this and she couldn't because she's doing the right thing. I think it's less common to have somebody doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's why again it's so important and I just don't think people know, like, you need to know where you're getting if you're going through a breeder. Just be super careful.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that can be done, but if you don't know the questions to ask, you
Mhm.
kind of like don't even know, and then you're inadvertently supporting some of these breeders that maybe need to be held to a higher standard,
Mhm.
but they're the ones everyone's getting their puppies from because people don't know. So
Yeah.
that's just another thing I wanted to throw in there with genetic testing.
Yeah.
You should understand what breed you're getting and what you can test for, and then
Mhm.
ask the breeder if they're testing for that.
Yeah.
You know, like we'll talk about epigenetics and stuff, but like if the foundation of the
Mhm.
foundation can be really good,
Uh,
you should want that.
Yes.
And we should want all breeders to do that.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, even just a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have known any of this. I wouldn't have
Mhm.
known to look for this in a breeder. I mean, I think there's a standard checklist that most people are given, and none of it, I mean, it's not inclusive of all the things we should really be worried about now as
Mhm.
there's more and more inbreeding and as there's more and more stressors today in our modern world. So, I wanted to say too that we'll use cancer for an example, and 'cause I don't want people panicked about their
Right.
dogs and being inbred, and so there's really not, I think people assume there's this cancer gene or that if a dog that develops cancer and other chronic disease, that there must be this specific gene responsible, but in most cases, it's not just a single cancer gene or disease gene, it's genes that represent vulnerabilities and sensitivities. So a dog can have genetic weaknesses in immune surveillance or like detoxification or inflammatory regulation. So it doesn't mean that they're destined for failure. It just means that they're going to be a lot more sensitive to all of our environmental pressures. They're going to be more sensitive. It's not an automatic death sentence. And that leads us into epigenetics, which is basically what that is that the environmental factors matter so much. And that is one of the main strengths of natural rearing breeding is in those sensitive first 8 weeks of life, or even before that. While the puppies are still inside mom, the mom's getting the appropriate support that she needs. Her environment is toxin free and she's fed a good diet. And the puppies during that first 8 weeks of life are getting supported well. And I
Mhm.
think that, is it called conventional breeding? The other side of the coin, like
I
traditional
think you
breeding,
can call
conventional
it that.
breeding. I
Yeah.
mean, our dog, the puppies are getting these perfect little puppies coming into the world are just getting slammed with so much at once. And this is while their immune systems are developing. And so, anyway, talk about what you do as a natural rearing breeder to ensure that our puppies start off really strong.
Well, yeah. Well, first, kind of what I wanted to do was define epigenetics
Yeah.
in a technical way, kind of, and then maybe more of an analogy so like we all
Yes.
understand what we're saying.
Yeah.
So this is from one of like this natural rearing breeder who's since passed away, but she's like a person all of us naturally rearing breeders kind of follow,
Mhm.
Jeannie Thomason. And she wrote up something that just says like epigenetics is how choices in environment and behavior cause chemical changes that turn genes on or off without altering DNA sequence. It's like a dimmer switch for genes to determine which ones are active and which ones are silent.
Yeah.
Okay, so I also heard this analogy, and I love analogies, and
Uh-huh.
this is like, oh, I wish I would have thought of this. But here's how this other guy described it. Okay, so let's say you have this recipe that's passed down from generation to generation for chocolate chip cookies or something, and like your great great grandma wrote it on this recipe card. So the original recipe from your great 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 grandma is like the DNA. And then as the generations go by, let's say your great grandma was like, "Ooh, if you add a little bit of extra butter here." So in the notes section, she'll just put add a little more butter or add a little less
Mhm.
sugar, or she like tweaks the recipe. So then as generations get passed down, this original recipe has little notes on the side that make little changes for the better,
Yeah.
essentially, to it. So by the time, 5 generations down have this recipe card, it's the original recipe with a bunch of awesome tweaks to make it, like, better.
Mhm.
So that's kinda how I think of epigenetics, like, this certain DNA can kinda get altered or dimmed or turned on certain things. So by the
Mhm.
time it reaches generations down, it's molding, hopefully for the positive or for the negative.
Yeah.
Does that help make sense?
Yeah, it does because the cookies, yeah, you could be adding ingredients that make them better than but there also could be people in that line who are saying adding things or taking away things that are making the cookies taste worse. So I think that's a great analogy. I
Yeah,
like
I thought
that.
so too. It was helpful for me. So what we're talking about is, like,
Yeah.
how can we make our cookies better?
Yeah.
Right? So, with these puppies, it's kind of the same thing. Obviously, everything you talk about of how to naturally rear a puppy, raw food, good diet, sunlight, being outside, exercise, you know, toxin free as possible.
Yeah.
Well, what we're working on is we want to start that.
Mhm.
And then, like, your own puppy, like, what did its mom eat and do?
Yeah.
What did its grandma eat and do? What does
Yeah.
great great grandma eat and do? And we want to create it where as far back as you can go, they were
Mhm.
all doing this stuff too, because we're tweaking the recipe. And by the time it comes down to your puppy, we're
Yeah.
hoping we've weeded a lot of this bad stuff out
Mhm.
through just like layers of different practices. It's not just one thing. So I get a little bit when I hear people say, "I asked them not to vaccinate my puppy," and
Mhm.
it's like, that's good, but there's many layers here
Yeah.
that, if you're really, really wanting to do it well, there's so many other things that are important, including, like, where did the mom come from? I was watching a podcast, they were more, talking about epigenetics in the training
Mhm.
training way, like dog training, and they were talking about how, like, some of their dogs that struggle, they'll realize, like, they were born to a stressed out mom who was, like, on the street, not doing well on the streets. And so they're like, "This dog was born in trauma," and, like, where you're working through all that. So it's behavioral, it's environmental, so whether we're
Yeah.
focused on health or training, just this line of, like, where did they come from, it affects your puppy, and so we're trying to work on. We do a lot with environment too. There's 2 programs. One is called Puppy Culture and one is called Badass Breeders.
Yeah.
And you just at different stages of development, the one thing I'm thinking of is at 3 weeks old, once their ears start to open up, we start playing thunderstorm sounds while they're eating, so they get used to just these sounds and to not react to them. Um, that's just one example of different environmental factors we're kind of throwing at them to help shape how they handle stress.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that we do in addition to, you know, feeding right and all the natural rearing stuff.
Yeah, because there was a topic that I knew existed, but I never heard it called inherited epigenetics that Dr. Kendra Pope talked about.
Hmm.
And this is just saying that a puppy or a dog's current environment isn't necessarily all that we have to worry about. We have to worry about, I think she said up to 6 to 8 generations back. Their epigenetics also influence how current puppies' genes turn on and off too, which is a crazy thing and which is why natural rearing breeding is so much more important because you're
Right.
really trying to get it right and create multi-generation puppies that have come from naturally reared dogs. And
Yeah,
It's a
and I
big
don't know that.
undertaking. It takes a lot of patience and dedication and just future thinking because obviously
Future
you're not
thinking.
gonna solve all the problems right away with one litter. So anyone who's getting a naturally reared puppy, you think this dog is bulletproof and it's not that simple because we're talking up to 8 generations back, your dog could be dealing with gene expression from exposures 8 generations back plus their current exposures. And I think you had a good story about one of your dogs who may have been showing some symptoms reflective of inherited epigenetics. Do you want to share that?
I will share that, although I think we've come down to it that that wasn't the problem.
Okay,
I'll
but it's a
kind
good
of
example, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll still talk about it because there's some points to be had within the story.
Yeah.
So, my dog Daisy is a first generation naturally reared dog, meaning her mom had some vaccines for the first 2 years of her life. Her mom was kibble fed for the first 2 years of her life. And so
Yeah.
Daisy would be the first one that just never has had kibble or vaccines, right?
Mhm.
But then Daisy's puppies would be like second generation. So my dog Lila, who's Daisy's puppy, she's a second generation. So, going down the line. So all of Daisy's puppies were second generation.
Mhm.
And so we kind of were like, these puppies are bulletproof. You want them to be. It's
Yeah.
the best chance you've got. But one of the puppies who went to a woman who is well versed in natural rearing, she already understood it. Um, we try to stay in contact with people as much as possible, and I stay in contact with her a lot through Instagram. We talk a lot,
Yeah.
and I'm like, how's this puppy doing? And she's like, a year later, and she's like, she's got itchy ears, and I can't figure it out. And
Mhm.
I'm just like, one of our puppies has itchy ears. Like, no, we did everything.
Yeah.
And so, she tried a few different things and just like couldn't get it under control. And so eventually she did have a consultation with Dr. Levy. And one of the few things left to try was kind of the thinking of, is this inherited vaccinosis
Mm.
because of, the lines and the studs that we use aren't naturally reared either, just because who even has one? We can't find them. So we have to use the stud dogs. They're not actually reared necessarily. Some maybe are, but not the ones we can find. And so we're like, maybe it's that expressing itself through this puppy and through these ears. And so she did a vaccine detox on a second generation naturally reared puppy. And we thought that that was maybe going to be the ticket. And I just talked to her actually this week, and she's like, you know what, that didn't seem to do much. But
Yeah.
I got her, she's like, I'm convinced it's environmental. And so she got her on this liver detox. And she showed me the picture of these clear ears.
Oh my gosh.
And so I guess the moral of the story is the benefit of these naturally reared dogs is when there is an issue, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion, right, to get to
Yeah.
the root. But there's just less layers to peel through
Yes.
because we didn't have to redo the diet. It was already done. We didn't
Mhm.
have to think about, is this from the vaccines directly? No, she's never done that. Is it from flea and tick? Well, no, because she hasn't done it. So you can get to the root a lot faster because
Yeah.
you don't have like 100 other baggage things that are going along with it. So although I wish this naturally rearing system was perfect, it's not, but I think it's your best chance, but it like gets you to the root faster because there's less variables. So I
Mhm.
think at this point we're just going for less variables. But I will say both my dogs, first generation and second generation, naturally reared, one is 8 and one's almost 3, and I haven't had any issues. Like what we're going for, at least with
Yeah.
my dog, that's what I got.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the story behind that. But I also did want to touch on, I don't know if we really want to go here, but
Yeah, let's go.
okay, so naturally reared stud dog. Okay. So there's so many factors like this coefficient of inbreeding. So in the natural breeding community, there's talk of what would you pick, a naturally reared stud dog who might have other undesirable qualities, or someone who like has, low COI, the structure you want, like everything, but they're not naturally reared.
Yeah.
Okay. So like there's just so many factors, but the overall consensus seems to be that um you would not pick the naturally reared dog if they had a lot of other undesirable issues. And so then I'm like, I want to look into that. Like, why are you saying that? And so I don't need to touch on this too far, but it has to do with mitochondria. So this was what I found from Paula that she had written out on this topic of naturally reared stud dogs. So both parents contribute to DNA, but how it's expressed lies more on the female side.
Yeah.
And so it has to do with mitochondria because that's in charge of how it's expressed. And the egg has thousands to millions of mitochondria, and the sperm has like 100, and it dies after fertilization. So the thought is what's going on with the female carries a much heavier weight when we're looking at it through genetics and DNA,
Yeah.
is why it seems like the consensus would be naturally reared stud dogs aren't as important as a lot of like the other factors that come into play.
Mhm.
Although I think if everyone could just naturally rear their dogs, we could have more naturally reared stud dogs.
I
Right,
know.
but we're just at the beginnings of this, so that's probably unlikely.
Yeah, that's really cool, and that's what I'm hoping, like, the goal with getting this information out and recording a podcast like this is breeders, I think there's a lot of bad breeders, but I think breeders do really care, and a lot of them just don't know this stuff exists, and if they hear about it, the more people trying to improve breeding programs, maybe there will eventually be some perfect stud dogs out there that
Mhm.
have all of the great behavior attributes and the looks and all the other health aspects, and they're also raised toxin free. That would be
Mhm.
awesome. I mean, Pine, I wish I'll have to talk to his breeder.
I know,
Pine
I'm
be
looking at Pine
Pine
like,
would love to be a stud dog.
he's a fine specimen.
No, I know. Maybe they would consider it one day.
But
Yeah, I
yeah, the
did.
problem is, like people who do natural rearing, okay, let's say
Yeah,
you keep a stud dog and you do everything naturally. Well, now your coefficient of inbreeding
it's
is going
gonna
to be
be
high
like
because
through
you
the
can
roof.
maybe use it for like one breeding or your one female, but now you keep a female and you cannot use that stud dog again
Yeah,
because
well,
that's
that's
it's the dad.
but maybe yeah, and I had to sign a contract that I wouldn't breed him, obviously, but
Yeah,
maybe some breeders can, they understand the importance of this, can loosen the reins a little and say, "Hey, let's," we can make an arrangement where we could stud him out to another natural rearing breeding program and just make dogs better overall. That could be a
yeah. I,
thing.
I think there's a lot that goes into it, but kind of overall, like yeah, so it would be a nice perk, if everything else
Yeah.
looked right. Like yeah. So, but yeah, it's things that not everyone thinks about, and I didn't know that. Like my two boxers that I got from a breeder, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I didn't ask any questions. I was like, this was my qualification. I kind of wanted a boxer that just had a little little white stripe down its
Mhm.
nose, but a lot of black in the muzzle, right? And then they showed me this picture. They're like of these 2-day old puppies, and I'm like, oh, that one because it had the least amount of white.
I know.
But
You're not alone in that. I mean,
I
I've
didn't
talked to
know.
people who are like, "Oh, what breed did you get Pine from?" And they're like, "Ah, well, I really like a golden that's big and fluffy and a show golden." And I'm just like, "That's you haven't lost a dog traumatically yet
Yeah,
to think that that's the most important thing." Like I know we're
right.
attracted to breeds because of their looks, but really temperament matters and obviously health matters so much. So I think as you
Yeah,
grow, you start realizing if we want these breeds to stick around and live, the goal should be them living a long, healthy life, not how
yeah,
beautiful they are.
right. But maybe you can get both.
You can, I think we can. I think we'll
I
get
think we
there.
can.
Yeah. I mean, pine is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah,
So,
I think mine's
I don't know
beautiful.
why someone would prefer show golden over him, but, it's
Right.
all personal preference. Yeah.
And I will say, like, kind of to the looks conversation a little bit. I mean, structure does matter. It's
Mhm.
not like, oh, it's only like what their DNA is or, their genetics are, because part of it is like their structure should be right. So there's a conversation to be had of like, well, are mutts healthier then? because
Oh, yeah.
their lines are different than their lines. And maybe in some ways you could look at it like that, but then like think about the structure. Like if you're breeding these two dogs that don't necessarily have like similar structures, I mean, this is a
Yes.
conversation that I don't know a ton about, but just from my own personal just
Yeah.
observations, it's like, let's say you, now I don't even know if this could happen, like a Chihuahua with a Great Dane, obviously, but like, what does that do? And like, how would their hips form or their bones? And like, could their structure support their legs or body? So I think then that comes into play too. It's like, okay, our mutts, they are genetically diverse, but now you're looking
Yeah.
at a structure issue.
There's definitely gonna be trade-offs, like, this dog may live a much longer life and have a more resilient immune system and, not fall victim to chronic disease, but is gonna have all these other issues, like structural issues.
Yeah.
It's something there's a term for this, I'm glad you brought this up. It's called hybrid vigor or heterosis, the phenomenon where offspring produced from genetically diverse parents tend to be healthier, stronger, and more resilient than either parent line alone. When two dogs with very different genetic backgrounds are bred, their puppies inherit a wider variety of genes, particularly in areas that control immune function, metabolism, and disease resistance. That broader genetic toolkit often results in stronger immune systems, fewer inherited genetic defects, and a greater overall vitality. And then, yeah, this goes on to explain the contrast of dogs with a tighter gene pool, who it increases the likelihood that they have recessive genes and the genes would express themselves, which is why we see higher rates of inherited disease in heavily inbred populations. But it doesn't touch on that fact, the structural side of it, the physical anatomy side of things
Hmm.
is yeah, that's something wow, I'm gonna have to dig into that now that you brought that up because we want our dogs to live longer regardless, but we want them to be comfortable and be
Yeah.
healthy and be able to move and enjoy their lives.
Hmm.
Wow, that's something
Yeah.
I did
So I
not
think
think of.
like, and I'm still learning too, right? But
Yeah,
kind of the overall thing is, you're trying to hit this bullseye, but you've got, for like this perfect, let's say perfect breeding, you've
yeah.
got so many factors coming your way. So you're trying to dodge this, but as you're dodging this comes up. And I think like if you're trying to do it responsibly, and it probably everybody has maybe a different opinion, but you're trying to like hit this bullseye that is impossible.
Mhm.
But to some people, you'll risk this to get this, and to some people, you'll risk this to get that. And I think that, as somebody who's looking for a puppy, do as much research as you can, but just understand what that breeder, how are you navigating to hit your bullseye, I guess. You know what I'm saying? And is that
Yeah.
something that aligns? Like for me, um, just like these naturally reared dogs that, and I want good temperament too, obviously. Like those, I just think top two,
Yeah.
the color or the white stripe on their nose is of very less important to me.
Yeah,
I think that I'll think my puppy's cute no matter what, but I want to
exactly.
like get these bigger factors. You can have the cutest dog that's very unhealthy or the cutest dog that is going to bite your face off.
Yeah.
Um, so I just feel like health and temperament. I think for most people you would say that, but then you get a little bit caught up in a certain look that you're envisioning too. So you just as a puppy buyer, you kind of have to figure out what is important to you as well.
Yeah, and if you have children or, the obstacles we run into raising our dogs naturally with vaccines, like you really don't want to take the risk of having a reactive or aggressive dog. Nobody
Hmm.
wants to have to deal with that and nobody wants that bred into their dog. I know when I was making the decision for Pine, so I think that there was 3 natural rearing breeders and didn't know much. Like I knew this is what I wanted, but I didn't know much about digging in. I was just looking at things like the breeder that I ultimately went with was clear across the country. I had to fly to get him and bring him home, which was nerve-wracking. I'd never not
Hmm.
vaccinated a puppy. I'm like, how is he going to be flying home? Is he going to be exposed to things? But when I ultimately decided, I loved that they did the puppy culture and they lived in a rural area, which I liked. I knew they would be exposed to a lot of different things outside. Also, they had 6 children ranging from age, I
Mm.
think 6 months to maybe 13, 14 years old. That is going to be a really resilient, sweet dog that's used to being handled and used to loud
Mhm.
noises. Like, I knew there was gonna be so much going on, so that is a big factor too.
Yeah, that's smart that you thought of, like, the kid
Yeah.
thing. So that was important to me too, just because I have kids and there's kids constantly, like, running through our house.
Mhm.
It's just chaos
That is
sometimes. And, it was kind of fun because when I had my litters, there's even in the puppy culture protocol, so the puppies don't really get teeth. Well, it probably varies, but generally, like, at 4 weeks old, the teeth are maybe just coming in, but they're not super sharp yet, and the strength of the bite isn't that strong. So, like,
Mhm.
that's a good time to have younger kids, like 4 years old or whatever, come over because
Yeah.
they'll have a positive experience with a puppy, and the puppy, they're not just gonna get bit and, like, throw them or something. And so there's, like, certain windows of time where it's, like, beneficial.
Yeah.
I mean, all my neighbors were like, "Just tell me when it's time, to come over." And so I'd be like, "Okay," send out a big text. "I need age groups, 3 to 5 years old. Send your kids over."
Yeah.
And then they'd be there in, like, 1 minute. Just, "Hi, like, I'm here to hold the puppies." And
Oh.
I love that because I love kids and I love puppies and I love
Yeah.
just whatever that combination that goes on. It was really fun, but that's something to think about too, like, what's your puppy exposed to? Because sometimes puppies are just in somebody's garage in a box, just being exposed to nothing.
Mhm.
And you think, before I started breeding, I thought when I got the puppy, like, day 1 to me was the day I brought them home. That's day 1. I didn't really think much about the 2 months prior.
Yeah.
And for me, now that I'm breeding, those 2 months is like a lifetime. I do so much with them. I love them. They have a whole life. They have a whole role in their litter. You can almost predict, oh, this one's gonna probably be scared of this, or this one's not gonna be scared of this. And so, like, there's just this whole dynamic. So when they're 8 weeks old, it seems like they're such babies, but to me, it's like you graduated from my program and you're so old, you know? Um, because they just have this whole life with the breeder, good or bad, before you get them. So I feel like those 2 months, they're exhausting.
Yeah.
When you're all into it. I mean, by 8 weeks, I'm kinda like, "Bye."
Yeah.
I love them, but maybe, like, if your kids go to college, you're kinda like, "It's time." But yeah, with these puppies, they have a whole life. There's so much that goes on during those first 8 weeks. I think it's
Yeah.
important to think about that because you just don't if you don't know. You just kinda don't. You see a cute puppy, you're like, "Oh, it's so tiny. This is day 1." It's like, "Oh, it's day, 60, and the past 60 days were intense."
Yeah, so there's something else, that first 8 weeks from an exposure, socialization standpoint, all of that's super important. We focus on that a lot with puppies. But something I think that scares a lot of people is that early immune system training and getting them
Mhm.
exposed to different things outside. Maybe not necessarily the first 8 weeks, but those first 8 weeks at home, that for that 8-week to 16-week window. And a lot of it is so important in shaping their microbiomes, which
Mhm.
control a lot of their immune resiliency. So, what kind of guidance do you send puppy parents home with as far
Yeah.
as exposure, what to be careful of? And I know you do a lot of you do only homeopathic no sode protocols with your
Yep.
puppies, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, to be honest, it feels tricky to us too. So, but at
Yeah.
4 weeks old with us is like we've decided that's when they're ready to start going outside.
Yeah.
And so you're bringing these 4-week-old puppies, I have, like, this area on the grass, and you're kinda like, "I don't know, I hope this goes well." You just do short
Yeah.
exposures, and so
Mhm.
we're working on it as well, and that's when
Yeah.
the no-sodes go on board for us too. So
Yes. Yeah.
you're kinda, like, trying to do exposure and trying to do no-sodes, and so by the time they go home, we've kind of been doing it for 4 weeks
Mhm.
ourselves.
Mhm.
But then that's kind of like in my yard, and we don't really go that many more places besides that, just out to the garden, just like different sections of the yard. But once they're 8 weeks and they start to go home, what we generally recommend, and we discuss this with
Yeah.
each litter, like, but kind of overall, what we recommend is, um, if you're going to go to a high traffic area where there's a lot of dogs, like, not in a dog park, but outside of maybe an empty dog park.
Mm-hmm.
Set them down for about 5 minutes, get them a little bit exposed, assuming there's maybe vaccine shedding going on at this dog park or maybe like some disease at this dog park. Just a little bit, bring them back home. Do that a few times a week. We have a whole
Yeah.
schedule all about it. And then the no-sodes, when to give them and this whole protocol. But
Yeah.
that's kind of the general idea is short natural exposures because they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to gain natural immunity, but not in this big way, in a little way.
Yeah.
And so what's hard is the first 16 weeks of their life, like socializing way. There's a couple fear periods, but in general, they haven't developed this sense of fear yet.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to get them out because you want them socialized just in the way of like they understand how to be outside of their home and it's not fearful. But then you're trying to balance how much is too much with exposure. Like some breeders who are more traditional, they say that your puppy shouldn't be set down on the grass until like their full like schedule of puppy shots is at 12 weeks. I don't know. So I followed this one girl on Instagram who got this new puppy. I mean, she's sitting at the park holding her 12-week-old puppy and she's just like, I can't wait till you can finally touch the grass. Because she's just like waiting for the full vaccine schedule to get through. And it's just like, she's trying to be so good and she loves this puppy so much. And I feel for her so much, but it's just such a different mindset.
Yeah.
That puppy should be on the grass by now, right?
Yeah. And on that note too, it makes me think, and I'm just like, this just came to my head, or no-sodes would be great for even those dogs who are doing the puppy series of vaccines, just to like offer that protection since you're not sure, like that's the scary part, like for anyone listening that doesn't understand how that works. So we kind of touched on this in Paula's episode, but the reason so many vaccines are given to puppies is because we don't know when mom's maternal antibodies wear off. And if a vaccine is given while mom's maternal antibodies are still there, the vaccine doesn't work. So like they're just getting vaccine after vaccine, hoping to hit that perfect window. So there could very easily be periods of time where a dog isn't protected at all. And that is pretty scary to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that kind of fits all this conversation is, I think Paula might have mentioned it, there is something called a nomograph.
Yeah, the nomograph, that's the coolest thing.
And
Yeah.
I didn't know about this with my litters.
Yeah, do you
But
do
you can
them?
what's that?
So you haven't done one yourself?
No, I didn't
Okay.
even know it was a thing. So I'm still learning as well. But it's a
Yeah.
test you can do. I think it's either 2 weeks before they give birth or 2 weeks after, kind of in that window. It's a blood test
Yeah.
that will tell when their maternal antibodies drop off.
Yeah.
So I think it's like sometime between 10 and 16 weeks, and it depends
Yeah.
on the breed and all this stuff. But like, if you were going to do a vaccine, let's say, you can say, oh, at 12 weeks, it starts to wear off. So if I did one strategic vaccine
Mm-hmm.
at 12 and a half weeks, the maternal antibodies won't block it,
Yep.
and then my puppies really not have a window of being at risk.
Yeah.
Or as somebody like me who does the no-sodes, I just would never, vaccinate my puppies. I could maybe say, okay, it looks like, 12 weeks it's going to drop. How am I going to be a little bit different this week, or just like be a little more aware? Like,
Yeah.
maybe I would go back to, like the 5 minutes outside. You know what
Yeah, that would be the
I don't
time
want
to
to,
start that natural exposure because it would be effective.
yeah,
Whereas
or you'd
yeah.
want to be like, if they're going to, pick up a disease, I'm kind of in the window that this might happen. I'm going to, like we've talked about, have
Yeah.
my things on hand and be
Uh-huh.
a little bit extra watchful. Like if I see something, maybe a little diarrhea one day, maybe I would give a homeopathic remedy quicker than I would, just because I know like this is, I'm going to say, a high risk time.
Mhm.
Knowing that would be helpful. So in your mind, a high risk time isn't just constantly, you can a
Yeah.
little bit zone it in, to have a little better of a handle on when you're truly
Yeah.
should be extra watchful.
Yes. So I'm gonna to try to recap some things for people because I'm sure
Okay.
we've confused a lot of people by now
Okay.
because we're so in this, and I always have to say, okay, I got to remember where everyone's at. So natural rearing breeders exist. I want everyone listening to know that if you are considering a puppy and you have been learning about holistically caring for dogs and you realize the importance and you're someone who's like, okay, I can wrap my head around doing minimal or no vaccines, raw feeding, making a very informed decision around spay, neuter, or preferably keeping an animal intact or opting for a hormone sparing sterilization procedure. If you're someone that's like, I really value having a dog that hasn't been raised with toxins, that has been started out on raw feeding, that isn't, I mean, you guys don't do you do herbal dewormers? No deworming at
Yeah,
all? Yeah,
we
herbal
do herbal.
deworming, puppy culture program, a program that gets dogs lots of social exposure, that takes the puppies outside. That exists. That exists, and that's what natural rearing is what I wanted to tell people. And those are things you want to look for when you're looking for them. And you can stalk their Instagram, stalk their websites, and make sure that they aren't medicating these puppies or exposing them to chemicals. They're not vaccinating. They're feeding raw from the beginning. All of that's really important. And I don't think you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't think it's a requirement or a standard procedure in natural rearing breeders currently to look at COIs, but that is something that we should be demanding or thinking about or asking breeders about because we want to make sure from a genetic perspective our dogs are healthy too. What are some other things that you would suggest people here look for when they're choosing a natural rearing breeder?
I think that what I would do is go to that code of ethics on nrbreeder.com,
Yeah.
and I would I would look that over and ask questions based on that. We've covered a lot of it, but I
Yeah.
just kind of want to warn, just as a holistic veterinarian could mean
Yeah.
a lot of things.
Yes.
It could mean they do some things holistically. It could mean they do all things holistically.
Yeah.
It's the same with breeders. Now,
Mhm.
the approved breeders for the nrbreeder.com, they've been vetted as much as possible to adhere to this pretty strict code of ethics. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if it could get a lot stricter. So if they've made it to that, from a natural rearing perspective, I don't know how much better you're gonna get.
Yeah, so
But
that's
if
the gold standard is
that's a
looking.
gold standard, but some people who are doing the gold standard just
Yeah,
aren't members, or they don't know about it,
right.
or they're just like, I don't feel like I need to be part of that.
Yeah.
But still, like, the code of ethics, you could ask them questions based on that, like, do you do this? Do you do that?
Yeah.
Um, so that, I think that would be the foundation of where I would start. And maybe you would read that code of ethics and you would say, there's a couple things in here that aren't important to me. Um,
Yeah.
I don't need my breeder to do that. And so
Mhm.
if you find one that doesn't do that, you could be like, I'm fine with that. But it's
Yeah.
just, you know what I mean? Like, it's just a good guideline of what we would say is the gold standard. Yeah.
Yeah, because, you and I have both suffered like extreme loss with dogs at younger ages. So we're like, we want the best of the best. And for some
Mhm.
people, like having some trade-offs is okay. But I
Mhm.
think as a whole, we want to try and support breeders who are actively trying to better their programs and actually actively trying to better like longevity in their breeds. Like that is extremely important. And I love purebred dogs. I don't wanna see
Mhm.
purebred dogs just I mean, we see it right now with so many golden retrievers
Mhm.
dying at 10 months, 14 months, 2 years old with horrible diseases, with autoimmune diseases, with cancer, and it just breaks my heart. So the more that we can support these breeders, know they exist, know what to look for, I think that's gonna make a huge difference.
One thing that Dr. Levy says, and this has stuck with me, she's like, we're at a deficit for healthy dogs.
Yeah.
I think there's a place for rescuing, and I love people who love to do that, but just know, like, in a roundabout way, that supporting unethical is coming, the puppy's coming from somewhere,
Yeah.
right? And so there's a time and a place for it. And if that's your thing, like that, I love that.
Yeah.
But also, if we want to not have a deficit of healthy dogs, we need to start supporting the ones that are doing it right. Even
Uh-huh.
in the natural rearing community, we kind of have like a group chat or whatever. And
Yeah.
some people want to do more litters, but they're afraid that they can't place them. Um,
Oh, I'm glad you brought that
and
up.
so they'll, yeah, so like, I kind of want to do a litter, but I don't have a waiting list right now, or I just
Mhm.
don't think I can find homes for them, because sadly, a lot of people, if they hear, oh, you don't vaccinate your
Yeah.
dog, uh, that, no, like, they don't want
No.
that. Or like, oh, you raw feed your dog, that's too weird. So it's kind of hard for us too, because we're like, we want to do this,
Mhm.
but somebody's going down the street and buying a golden retriever for $200 from this guy. And,
Yeah.
you know, so I think the more everyone's educated, and it's like, could we all like get together and try to
Yeah.
make dogs healthier?
And that's why you and I do, like, putting our necks out there and dealing with all this backlash and sharing all this information, we're raising awareness. The more people learn about it, the more they're gonna
Mhm.
demand those types of dogs that are cared for in that way and bred ethically. We'll get there. I'm
Yeah, we'll
confident that
get
we'll get
there.
there. I see the shift happening,
Yeah.
but you're right. I mean, I follow some natural rearing breeders, and I can see where the dogs stick around till 12, 14, 16 weeks, and a lot of the hard part of that too is when you put all of that work into those puppies, a lot of breeders, like Amy at Chalk Pond, you probably do this too. You have contracts
Mhm.
where they have to continue to no vaccinating, no spay neuter, raw feeding, and as much as people could understand that that's the key to a healthy dog, that just looks like a lot of work to some people,
Mhm.
and they don't want to commit to that, and
Yep.
that's sad. That brings us to a whole other bigger picture problem where
Mhm.
we get so
Yeah.
angry at the conventional system, but yet we're not willing to do the work to do it the right way because it does involve work, unfortunately. Conventional care is very convenient. Doing things the right way that's going to give your dog the best quality of life and potentially more longevity is just going to be a lot more difficult. But I just couldn't imagine being in your shoes and not finding the best fit for people who are going to continue all that hard work that you did in your program
Mhm.
and raising those puppies. I would be stalking these people, like making sure they were doing everything right.
But like once you get the right family, I mean,
Yeah.
like, so a lot of our puppies would fly, to different places, but some
Yeah.
of them would come to my house. And like, I just loved it so much. I just feel like I'm giving you like my best effort. Like, here's
Yeah.
this puppy that I've poured my soul into,
Hmm.
and it's like getting a puppy's the best. And so they're just so excited, and it's just
Yeah.
like this awesome day. But yeah, so it's stressful, and
Yeah.
what so I basically was mentored by Melissa, so she kind of
Okay.
like was at the front end of a lot of these things. And
Hmm.
I remember like my first litter, I would hear her on the phone like interviewing puppy families, and I would just like start cringing because I'm like, she's so harsh. Oh my gosh, like that's so blunt. But she had learned if she wasn't interviewing these families properly,
Hmm.
it was the wrong fit or it was a waste of time for everybody. And so I
Yeah.
think like if you found a breeder and you feel like they're being hard on you or they're like asking you too many questions, or it's because we want this to be the right fit.
Yeah.
And if you're wishy-washy about it, people don't understand, then they get a puppy and then they maybe just kind of don't do anything you recommended, and then they're like, "Oh, my puppy developed this." You're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
well, did you vaccinate?" "Well, yeah." "Okay, are you feeding kibble?" "Yeah." "Okay, well, these are the things we told you not to do." You
Yeah,
know? So
that's another red flag is if your breeder isn't interviewing you, that's a red flag because your standard traditional conventional breeder, whatever we want to call it, they're just feeding mom kibble. Maybe you're feeding her a
Mhm.
little more kibble because she's pregnant and
Mhm.
the puppies are born and they're putting out a trough of kibble to feed the puppies off of mom's milk, and they're doing a chemical dewormer and they're doing
Mhm.
vaccines at 7 weeks, and then they're just sending the dogs off to anybody that'll come up with the money, and they don't care where the puppy goes, they don't care about the health, they're just in it for the money. And it breaks my heart that there's so many great breeders, and all breeders of purebred dogs get this bad rap
Yeah.
because these bad ones
Mhm.
exist. And
Yeah. And I think there's different levels, like, I don't think everybody who feeds kibble is a bad breeder. You know
yeah,
what I'm saying? Like, so, like, in the breeding world, or I think in the world, if you're called a backyard breeder, this
yeah,
is the ultimate diss. You do
yes.
not wanna be called a backyard breeder, and I think different people have different definitions of what they
Yeah,
mean
what
when
is
they.
your definition of backyard breeder?
Well, that's a good question. I don't ever wanna be called one. I think to me, it's like if you're not breeding for, like, to better the breed,
Mhm.
and that could be different definitions for everybody, but I think naturally rearing is bettering the breed. I think as much testing before you find the right dog to breed together, that
Yeah.
I think that is responsible. To me, backyard breeding can be at a very different level, but at the very bottom level, it's
Mhm.
just like you have a backyard full of dogs and whoever mates with whoever, and then you just sell as many puppies as you can and you just kind of keep this thing going and you don't care who gets them and you're just like trying to make some money. To me, that's like
Yeah.
an extreme definition of bad backyard breeder. And then I think there's like everywhere in between. So,
Yeah.
um, but I think if you're breeding on purpose, but your purpose is to better the breed,
Yeah.
um, you're not a backyard breeder. But if you're breeding on purpose because you want to make money,
Mhm.
I think it's okay to make money. I mean, that's people's job. But the intent, the heart behind it, and I think that each person has to be the judge on what do you think the heart behind this breeder is,
Yeah.
and hopefully support the ones that are trying to do it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to what you were saying about adopting rescues
Hmm.
and people, preaching that that's the better alternative, stop supporting breeders. An important aspect of that too, going back to epigenetics, is these rescue dogs, these mixed breeds, they may come from more diverse gene pools. They may have more genetic diversity, but then inherited epigenetics comes into play.
Hmm.
So they're coming from long lines of who knows what. And then in the rescues, they're a lot of times, especially if they're entering as adults, they've already, well, I guess at any age really, they usually have already had vaccines and then they enter the rescue and there's no, they don't know the vaccine history. So they hit them with all these vaccines again. So you might be thinking you're getting this healthier mixed dog that's going to be more resilient, but they've already had all of these environmental stressors stacked on top of them. Um, and not just from food, vaccine, chemical exposure, but also so much emotional baggage and stress
Hmm.
from the whole experience too. I really want dogs to find homes and I wish there weren't so many ending up in the shelter system. But like you said, when you do support that system, it just kind of keeps it going. It's like,
Yeah, I think you're in a way you're unintentionally supporting the very thing that you're against.
exactly. It's a hard
It's
balance.
weird.
Yeah.
So I've always, this is not realistic either, but I've always pictured like, what if every breeder had contracts like we do? Like, if you have to give up your puppy, we want them back.
Yeah.
Like, we never, ever, ever want them to end up in a shelter. We will find them home. So
Yeah.
good breeders that would be something to look into too. Will they take the
Yeah.
puppy back?
Yeah.
And I just think, okay, let's say every time somebody got a puppy, they got heavily vetted
Uh-huh.
and it was a breeder that would take the puppy back. Then there would be no dogs in shelters because
Yeah.
everyone's responsible. Obviously, that's just unrealistic, but it just makes me think good breeders aren't the problem because our
Yeah.
circle of things going on isn't part of that.
No.
But I also, oh my gosh, my neighbors just got two rescue dogs that are a year old. It's like a black lab and a German shepherd, and they seem to be really good and they're
Yeah.
so cute. And I'm like so happy they got rescued and I
Aw.
love them.
Mhm.
Just know what you're doing and maybe you'll be like, "You know what? I'm a person who rescues and I'm recognizing it might be more of an uphill battle and
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to do better for this dog and I'm committed to like this uphill battle in a sense."
Yeah.
Maybe that's for you, but just it's probably an uphill battle whether it's in health, epigenetics, temperament.
Yeah.
You're gonna just deal with some baggage, and
Yeah,
maybe
and
some people are equipped for that. I know I'm not. I'm
yeah,
not good enough, like, I'm not a good enough trainer, and I kind of like, now that I know about natural rearing, it's like, I want a really clean foundation
yeah,
if I'm
and
gonna do this.
boycotting breeders isn't the answer, like you were saying. It's just not the answer. And like you were saying, these breeders who, like you, who say, if you can't keep the puppy for whatever reason, you fall on hard times, it's not working out, we'll take them back. There's so many purebred dogs that end up in the shelter system too. It's
Mhm,
not just a puppy problem. It's
mhm,
just, it becomes a training issue. And yeah, if breeders were taking them back instead of letting these people dump them off at a shelter, it would make such a big difference too.
mhm. Yep, lots of problems,
I
but,
know there's lots
um
of problems, but
you just kinda like you're doing share what you know and one step at a time, maybe you change someone's mind or, like, point out some things and we all start just doing better, and maybe someday there won't be, like Dr. Levy said, a deficit of healthy dogs. Can we just, like, turn this trajectory around?
yeah.
Um, we're I'm trying to, you're trying to, it just
Yeah.
we're
The
trying.
The answer to me was clear, like, or the path was clear after losing dogs to cancer, and, like, I have to start with a dog who's healthy as possible. I wanna support a breeder that's doing everything they can to help mitigate this risk or the damage by all of the horrible things our dogs encounter, whether it's things we do to them intentionally or unknowingly, whether it's, stuff in our environment we can't control. I really wanna support breeders that are trying to raise resilient dogs. Like, it wasn't a question for me. So I'm hoping that people listening here will know this exists, and I know it's most people aren't ready to get puppies. You're
Yeah.
committed for hopefully forever, but you're
Yep.
committed for 8, 10, 12, 15 years to a
Right.
dog. And a lot of people hearing this are like, oh, I want a dog with a clean slate right now. And I wish I would have known this sooner, but it's just something to keep in the back of your mind that this is an option for when you are ready for your next puppy. 'Cause I remember being in the trenches with my cancer dogs. And they were also seniors and getting older. So I was dealing with all these things that are common in senior dogs, but I was also dealing with cancer. And I remember just feeling so what's the word I'm looking for? Like, maybe lonely, like seeing people with their young, healthy dogs, and you're dealing with these old seniors who are sick. And I guess where I was going with that is it looks like from the outside, seeing someone like me with Pine and having all of this knowledge. And he came from a naturally reared breeder, and he is just pure and perfect still at almost 2 years in. I just want to remind people that I was not always here. I didn't
Mhm.
know any better, and I did everything wrong for my last dogs. And you can get there too. When it comes time to bring another dog into our lives, like, we know how to better approach that and then how to support them throughout their lives too.
Well, and even I wanna touch on that too, like,
Yeah.
if you have a 5-year-old dog or a 10-year-old dog, you can start doing better things, like, don't just
Yeah.
think, "Oh, I screwed up, whatever.
I
I'll
know.
wait for
Yeah.
the next one to come around." I
Yeah.
mean, that's why I love what you're doing is, like, you're helping people who are just, like, in the middle of
Yeah.
wanting to turn it around.
Mhm.
Um, so, like, I wanna acknowledge that too. I mean, I've been there too. It's like you have almost a constant pit in your stomach because
Mhm.
you know what you should be doing and maybe you, like, don't have enough knowledge to do something different, but you know you should.
Yeah.
This is, like, heavy emotional stuff, and then you
Yeah.
love your dog and, yeah, it's just kinda hard sometimes.
Yeah.
So, I wanna just acknowledge that, like, we're all just trying to do better and, um
Yeah. Yeah. Well, did you have anything else that you wanted to did we cover all of our topics?
I think we covered all of our topics, but I did kinda wanna close with this because you and I have talked
Yeah.
about this too, is these dogs are supposed to bring joy.
Yes.
They're the best. Um, if you feel like your anxiety is like, this is just all too much information and you're, like, losing the feeling of, like, looking at your dog and just, like, having joy, you're
Yeah.
probably going too fast. Like, your
Mhm.
anxiety like, I get it too sometimes. It's like, I can feel when I compare it to, like, eating a healthy meal. You can eat a lot of healthy things, but you get full sometimes and you need to stop and digest before
Yeah.
you can, like, eat more. And so
Mhm.
I feel like, even this week, I had something go on where I was kinda stressed about something about my dog, and I just, like, fed myself all this information, and it just got it to a time where I'm like,
Yeah.
"I need to just stop and take a break. This is just too much right now." So I just kind of want if you're losing the joy of having a dog, you're going too fast. This
Yeah.
is one step at a time. I've been doing this now for over 15 years, almost 20 years, is
Yeah.
why, like, I can take on this information and it makes sense. But it was a long time. So just
Mhm.
don't lose the joy of having a dog. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something I feel guilty about every day. 'Cause I'm like, it's my role to share all this information, and I just want people to learn and know and understand. But I think a lot of people interpret it as this pressure. I gotta stop flea and tick prevention today. My
Mm.
dog is already neutered. What am I gonna do? And I feel like it's can be interpreted as doomsday. But no, I just want everyone to know how you can do better. And you're right. When I first started learning all of this stuff, it was like a waterfall was just pouring over me where I just couldn't focus on anything but trying to overhaul everything in my life and my dog's life to do
Mhm.
better. And that is not the way. I've been in that stressful place. So I really like that you said that. Just take bite-sized little pieces. And I always say just do one small thing every day to, like, get yourself there.
Mhm.
And yeah, if it is overwhelming you to a point that you're so stressed, you got to stop because
Yeah.
that makes things worse. There's this, I'm interviewing someone where we'll talk about the happiness factor. At the end of the day, if our dogs are living as close as they can, they're living like dogs. And if
Yeah.
you're regulated and you're calm and you're happy, your dog's going to be so much happier. There comes a point where the stress can impact them worse. So just breathe and just take it a little
Yep.
bit at a time. And knowledge is supposed to be powerful, and empowering and not something that's going to drag you down and stress you out. So there's so many things. There's so many different pieces and you just give and take where you can. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be perfect. It never has to be all or nothing. I think people get bogged down in that where they're like, if
Yeah.
I'm not doing the top tier perfect thing in every
Yeah.
area, I'm failing. No, it is a cumulative effect. So if you can just focus on areas that you're able to manage and still balance happiness in your life
Yeah.
and in your dog's life, you're doing great. I'm glad
Yep,
you
yeah,
added
so I
that.
think that my overall when I post things, I just never want it to be like, "Oh, look what I'm doing. It's so awesome, and you
Yeah.
should do it too." I fear that it can be taken like that, kinda like what you said, but I just
Yeah.
kinda wanna show, "Hey, it's possible to do this, and if this looks, like, interesting to you,
Yeah.
watch how I'm doing it, I've been at it for a while."
Yeah.
So, yeah, if people are taking it in a way that it makes them lose their joy, then just step back. So, yeah, I think I just wanna make sure everybody enjoys their dogs.
I know, me
Yeah,
too. Because at the
yeah,
end of the day, that's really what it's about, is
yeah.
just making sure they have the happiest, best life possible, and I mention this a lot where you can get all of these things right. You can minimize the toxins, you can stop vaccines, you can stop flea and tick prevention, you can raw feed, and I think a lot of people hyperfixate on that, but if your dog
Mhm.
is miserable inside all the time, they're not getting quality time with you, they're not getting outside time with you, and they're not getting some level of freedom, none of that matters. So focus on that first and then chip away at what you can. So,
Yep.
Nicole, tell people where they can learn from you because you are an amazing teacher, especially when it
Oh,
comes to analogies. I'm so glad that you shared some here today. And like, you're such
yeah.
a homeopathy nerd. You share a lot of great content on homeopathy that helps people to get started. I think if anyone listening hasn't got into homeopathy yet, you absolutely should. It's super easy and it's a lot of fun.
Mhm.
And it just gives you so much more confidence in handling small matters at home for your dog. So Nicole has a lot of great content on homeopathy. Remind people too about the Natural Rearing Breeders Association website and all of those things.
Yeah, okay, so the Natural Rearing Breeder connection is nrbreeder.com, and
Mhm.
that's where you'd find a code of ethics. That's where you'd find a list of different breeds that are approved, through the NRBC. So
Yeah.
that's where I'd go. There's a lot of information on there, too. And then right now, I'm just on Instagram at Puppies from True North, like underscore in between puppies.
Yeah, I'll put a link to your Instagram in the show
Thank
notes.
you. I'm like, what even is it? Eventually, probably once I start actually my boxer breeding program, I'll have a website for all that too, but I'm just not there yet. So
Yeah.
right now, my Instagram is kind of where to find me.
Yeah, she's a great page to follow. Like there's so many great voices and I think as you're learning about this stuff it really helps to follow accounts that all are on the same page so you don't feel alone and then you're just getting different perspectives and experiences. It just helps to build confidence in caring for your dog this way because there is a lot of unlearning involved and I know there's a lot of intimidation and uncertainty learning from those of us, like Nicole, who's been at this for 15 years, it's like she's an incredible resource for seeing that it can be done. I remember you talked about raw bones at the beginning, and I can remember being terrified of feeding raw bones for the first time, but I just dove right in with my puppy because I'd seen content of your puppies chewing on chicken heads and stuff. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
these animals know what to do. She's
Yeah.
a great follow. And Nicole, thank you so much for sitting here talking with me. Thank you everyone for listening, for following all of our little tangents. We're both very passionate. And we probably, when I listen back to this, I'm gonna be like, wow, we were, we were really all over the place. But hopefully some of that resonated with you. And yeah, thanks for being here. Love your dogs.